Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. So what is it about certain music that trends time and space, that is timeless, right? I think we could all agree most of the music we listen to that we've talked about on this station is timeless. But what about that small bracket? It just reminds me of a certain period in time in your life, hence the nostalgia factor. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about nostalgia. I've chose 10 songs that really fit for me personally the nostalgia factor. When I hear these songs, they take me right back, but only to that one particular time or place in my life. So I don't really listen to these songs very much because they induce a lot of melancholy and longing for a simpler time. So, all right, we're going to talk about that. The first choice here I have is a song. It's a 1968 number one hit written by Hal David and Burt Bacharach. The song is called This Guy's in Love with You. A song by Herb Alpert, the trumpet player. So when I hear this song, it really brings me back to a simpler time when I was a child. This was one of my mom's favorite artists and favorite tracks. She would always hum and sing this song while I was growing up. She would blast it on the stereo. She always blamed us four siblings for ruining music for her because we'd play this loud rock and roll and it just kind of ruined music for her and she didn't want to hear any music, but she had a soft spot for Herb Alpert. Love this track. So anytime I hear this track, it just takes me back to a simpler time, late 60s, early 70s, when things were a lot different, obviously, in the world and in my life as I was so small. I didn't have a care in the world. So it really reminds me of my mom, this particular track here. So Herb Alpert, This Guy's in Love with You from 1968. Back in about 1970, 71, I had never bought an album or a single, but I used to go with my dad to Sears a lot, and he'd head over to the tool department. He loved the Craftsman tool department. And of course, I'd always head over to the record store and just flip through records. I didn't really know what artists were what artists, only a few. So I asked my dad if he could buy me a 45, and I just kind of randomly chose this 45. And every time I hear this song, this is the original version of this 45 that I bought. It's the Grassroots Temptation Eyes. I believe this came out in 1971. This is the first 45 I ever bought. My dad bought me this back in probably maybe early 71. I think I was in kindergarten at the time, but I just randomly chose this particular track or song because I like the label, the Dunhill label. But yeah, this is another nostalgia one for me on various levels. And when I do randomly or very seldom hear Temptation Eyes on the radio or on a streaming service, it always reminds me of that experience going to Sears and buying this 45, my first 45 I ever bought. Fast forward to maybe the mid-'80s, I was going to junior college part-time. I had just started this part-time job at a department store called Mervyn's. And I think they had a set list of about 20 songs they would play throughout the day over and over and over. And I think the job only lasted about a month and I had to get out. Didn't like it. But every time I hear the song Be Near Me from ABC, I think of that period in life. I think it was around fall 85, working at Mervyn's, not being too happy, going to college, junior college. So yeah, I must have heard this song hundreds of times within a month span that I had worked there. And yeah, Be Near Me really reminds me of that particular period in life. Not sure where I was going. I was majoring in journalism at the time, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue that, etc., etc. Working part-time jobs like everybody did. So yeah, Be Near Me really reminds me of that particular period in time. This particular track, back in the late 80s, most of the 90s, I was in a band called Wits End. We played a lot of the LA clubs. We were trying to make it like a lot of other bands did. We did a lot of cover tunes, and we did a cover of this song by the 3 Degrees from 1974, When Will I See You Again? So every time I hear this track now, I think about playing out in clubs in LA. This was part of the set that we would play. And yeah, again, nostalgia, purely nostalgia. Back in the early 80s, there was a club in the San Fernando Valley called the Country Club. It was a really cool club because, I was too young to drive at that time. It was maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of being able to drive a car. So my mom would drop my friends and I off at this club, and I would see The first LA appearance from U2 back in 1981. I'd see early appearances from Motley Crue, Metallica, and a lot of new wave bands. And I remember seeing this band quite a bit there, Missing Persons. This is their original 45 EP they released in 1981 before they were signed. And it had Mental Hopscotch, which was later a hit, a cover of The Doors' Hello, I Love You, and a song called Destination Unknown. And Destination Unknown always reminds me of that period where I was 16, summer of 1981, going to the country club, seeing all these new wave bands and heavy metal bands. And I think tickets were only like $3, $4, $5 to get in. And I see a lot of these bands that would later become huge. So anytime I hear Destination Unknown, it always reminds of that period in life, being 16, just kind of going out, experiencing new things, seeing bands, and going to this place called the Country Club, which was a really cool little club back in the San Fernando Valley in Reseda, California. So again, more nostalgia for you. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, a lot of us kids on the street would listen to AM radio. And I had a friend across the street, and he had a whole collection of 45s. And we must have played this song hundreds of times by Cher, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. This really brings back kind of the period of the summer of 1973 for me. Yeah, always brings back good memories. Great little tune here, a little ditty by Cher, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. Another one too, back in 1978, our family took a road trip from California to British Columbia. This was about the summer of 1978. I was listening to a little bit of AM radio back then. I remember Life's Too Good by Joe Walsh, but this one was always on the radio. And on our road trip, this song came on the station quite a bit. Always reminds me of that road trip we took to British Columbia. Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street always elicits a little bit of nostalgia for me when I hear that. It reminds me of that really cool trip to British Columbia. More nostalgia. Another one too, speaking of road trips, a track that really reminds me of the summer of 1975, another road trip. We would take a lot of road trips as a family. We were heavy into travel. I remember we took a trip to San Francisco, and then we went up to Lake Tahoe, and this song was on the radio all the time. I thought it was Paul McCartney. Had no idea it was a different band. And that was 10cc's I'm Not in Love. Still love this track. Still reminds me of that trip back in 1975. I believe this is like the single edit, but I believe there are no actual string instruments on this, no guitars. It's all keyboards. I think one of the first 45s or singles to hit the top 10 that had nothing but just synthesizers in it and keyboards. So I always thought this was a really cool track, especially that middle part, Be Quiet, Boys Don't Cry, Boys Don't Cry. I thought that was always really cool. So yeah, another nostalgia tune for me here from 75. 10cc's I'm Not in Love on the Mercury label. And another one growing up reminds me of summer barbecues. I think that my most early memories as a child were the Doughboy pool we had in our backyard, summer barbecues, playing on the street with kids. And I always remember Up, Up, and Away by the Fifth Dimension during that period being a huge hit. And another nostalgia favorite. And then a few more here. Back in 1975, around Christmas time, I was really into this particular track, wanted this for Christmas, and was very happy when I received the 45 of Island Girl by Elton John. I remember friends on the street and I loved this track, played it a million times, and brings back good memories. And then one last one, really reminds me of my mom. This is probably one of her favorite songs of all time back in the day, and probably one of her favorites next to Herb Alpert. And this track is By the Time I Get to Phoenix by Glenn Campbell. I believe this came out in '68. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's just a little bit of nostalgia coming from me. If you have any nostalgia favorites that remind you of a certain time in your life, let me know in the comments section. As always, thanks for watching. Take care. If you dig the content, just press that subscribe button. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.